Good evening, boxing fans, and welcome to another exciting edition, a very exciting edition of Enter the Ring Live for Tuesday, August the 10th, 2021, 4 days away from AJ the Rage's birthday.
It's right around the corner.
Right around the corner. Man, interesting news. Okay, this is a little impromptu. I mean, we're back on our normal Tuesday schedule, but we actually were kind of revamping, maybe revamping the show, coming up with some new ideas before we're going to relaunch. But the news that just broke within the last hour or two of the big fight on the 21st, well, not canceled, but the major change in the fight. Just reported that Errol Spence is withdrawn from the August 21st pay-per-view against Manny Pacquiao due to a tear in his left, a retina in his left eye. During a routine. Well, here's the thing. We talked about it a little bit before the show. Normally these ophthalmology exams where they dilate your pupils and they really look inside your eye. If you've ever had it done, I've had it done. It's horrible because you can't focus on anything for a while. It takes a couple hours for your eyes to come back. But you got to think, okay, was this the routine one? Or are they checking Errol Spence now every fight? But either way, Spence is out. Yordenis Ugas has been catapulted into the main event spot, and I believe he was training to fight on this card. Maybe not the co-main, but he was definitely on this card. Maybe the co-main because he was actually
supposed to fight against Antonio Moran.
Okay, and AJ, you've seen Ugas fight live. I mean, you're pretty familiar with most of his fights in recent memory. What do you think of Ugas stepping in? What kind of challenges does that pose to Manny? And then we'll maybe talk a little bit further about Spence. But let's go ahead and talk about the fight that we are eventually ultimately going to get.
I got to tell you, bro, when I heard this from you, just we weren't even going to really do the show today because obviously I've been a little under the weather, I'm a little tired, and but when I got this news from you and you mentioned that Ugas was going to be the replacement, obviously somebody was already in training to defend his title against Marone on the undercard. I saw Ugas in his split decision defeat to Sean Porter over at Dignity Health Center. I got to tell you, not just myself, but I would say the vast majority of the people that were there felt that Ugas won the fight. He dropped Porter during the fight, actually twice during the fight. Was only giving credit for one knockdown. The other knockdown, but I mean, it was a pretty devastating knockdown, much more devastating than the knockdown that he suffered against Errol Spence. The point I'm getting is Ugas is a completely different monster. He's a guy that, like you said, I mean, he first of all, he's a right-handed fighter. He's a really big guy for the welterweight division. I think this really sets up a very interesting. I think that in reality, if Manny's people were looking at the big picture, I don't think Ugas's name would even come into the conversation.
You think, well, right away, I'm going to touch on what you said about him being a big fighter. He is big. We talked about it earlier. He's equally as tall as Spence, but he just fills out more. He's a physical specimen. How he makes 147, he's kind of like it's kind of like when I see him, I say, how does he make 147? Kind of the same way. How does Jermell Charlo make 154? They're physically big guys. He's thicker though. You can see he's got bone density, strong. Cuban fighter, good amateur background, very strong. Since his loss, since that disputed loss to Porter, rolled off many consecutive victories against good fighters. Early in his career, had a decision victory over Jamal James. Ugas, to me, the one thing that scares me a little bit about this fight for Pacquiao, and I mean, I like both fighters, so I'm not saying I'm scared for Pacquiao, but I'm saying if I was in Manny Pacquiao's camp, I would be concerned about the speed of Ugas, because Ugas is a good counterpuncher, and he is faster than Spence. Everybody in the last week's been talking about, well, the speed of Manny Pacquiao. Many trainers, a lot of guys have gone on there, and guys are saying, Freddie Roach, a lot of guys are just saying, Spence is just not fast enough for Manny Pacquiao. Well, Ugas I'm not going to say he can match Manny's speed, but he's definitely quicker. The punches are going to be coming at Manny Pacquiao a lot quicker than they're going to be coming from Errol Spence. Errol Spence is methodical. You kind of know what he's going to do. He's going to kind of jab his way in and just, work to the body, work upstairs, just workman-like kind of fighter. That's just the kind of fighter Errol Spence is. He wins with his durability and just breaking guys down. Well, Ugas can land that one shot
Yeah,
You
he
know what I
can.
mean? Ugas has power, and he can land that one shot, and he's definitely a threat. I'm not gonna say, and once again, this is the classic tale of styles make fights. I'm not saying Ugas would have beat Spence, but in this particular fight, Ugas is a very, very live dog here. I
I
mean,
think
man,
he's not. I think he's not just a live dog, bro. I think in some ways, a lot of people, and you'll have to get this from our man on the streets in Las Vegas, Neil. But I guarantee you, this is really opening up a lot of eyes, especially when it comes across the betting. I know that the betting was going to be tight between, people were going to favor Manny, maybe not just because of Manny, because of his abilities, but because he's Manny.
yeah,
Where
the
Spence,
human factor was going to drive a lot of the betting. The late wagering was all going to go
exactly.
on Manny.
But now this takes a different turn because Ugas doesn't have that high profile stature that Spence has, but he's more of the betting man's guy because the guys that actually know boxing are going to look at a guy like Ugas and go, you know what? This is the better risk to take in a situation with Ugas because, obviously he's going to be a live underdog, but you got to look at some of his past fights. He's been the busier fighter compared to Manny or Spence. He had almost three fights. And he had a fight in 20. He's got this fight in 2021 coming up. He had almost three fights in 2020. The split decision win against a tough Abel Ramos, who totally dismantled Figueroa. His stoppage victory of Mike Dallas. Obviously, his victory over having undefeated former champion Omar Figueroa Jr., his first loss. And before that, his controversial defeat to Sean Porter. And you can go beyond. This is a guy who's fought some of the best fighters out there. He holds wins over guys, a guy who you hold high on your list in Jamal James.
And he's been relatively active, especially for most of the high profile welterweights today that are fighting once, maybe twice a year. He's fighting pretty regularly. I mean,
he's always there.
At least he's always there. He's always in a fight. Man, this is going to be, I mean, I can't say I'm as excited no, I guess I can. I'm as excited to see this fight than I was to see Manny against Spence because it was the unknown. It was the theater of the unknown. Like, what are we going to see? Because we know how great Spence is, but against a speedster like Manny, who's had plenty of time to train and get his body right and get the proper rest, I think this fight. Look at a lot of casuals are going to jump off and go, I'm not going to pay for the fight or whatever. But I certainly am going to, and I'm going to be excited to see that main event.
One of the things too that about Ugas that's different than Spence, even though Spence is a physically decent size welterweight, Spence doesn't really use his physical presence to bully fighters. You saw that in the Sean Porter fight. There was moments where he tried to, but he doesn't really do that. Go back and watch even some of Ugas's earlier fights, not just earlier fights, but some of his sparring sessions. I remember one in particular, one against Teofimo Lopez. Now, I'm not trying to say Teofimo Lopez is Manny Pacquiao, but in that fight, you saw Teofimo had the speed, he had the angles, he was having his successes, not really doing anything to Ugas that was going to affect him. But once Teofimo kind of crossed that line and tried to bully Ugas, you saw that physical strength that Ugas possesses and the way he just kind of threw Teofimo from corner to corner. That's why I think Manny's going to run into some problems with Ugas. Ugas did the same thing against Sean Porter. I don't know of any other fighter in boxing that's been able to back a fighter up the magnitude of Sean Porter, a guy who comes in with that bull to, rushing in kind of mentality. Ugas did that. This is going to be a different monster for Manny Pacquiao.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. The physicality. I mean, this might be a fight where you're going to see Manny doing quite a bit of holding in here. Because
I don't mean to interrupt you, bro, but remember the last time Manny Pacquiao, and I'm not trying to say that I thought that Manny lost his fight, but the last time Manny Pacquiao had a fight where he was in there against a guy that was physically a little rough and tumble was against Jeff Horn, and he came out on the wrong side of the decision.
Yeah, and now granted, it was obviously controversial, but you're right. Though he that's where that physical or that lack of physical size and strength is a disadvantage, and it's a handicap for Manny.
Absolutely.
And I would reckon to say that Ugas is a lot stronger and more agile, more balanced than a Jeff Horn. So if it gets into a rough and tumble inside kind of fight, will the durability? I mean, can Manny, remain intact? Will he start to break down against an Ugas who's got to be looking up at the stars right now and saying, "Thank you, Lord. This is my chance. I had my chance again." Now, granted, he does hold a version of the WBA title, the interim or the regular title or whatever it is, but this would be this would actually solidify his place as a WBA welterweight champion. because Manny was like the champion in recess, and then now there's somebody else has another version of it. I don't know if you towards the end of the show we could talk about this Maestre who now has a version of it, the Venezuelan. Yeah, complete joke. But
well, you're absolutely right, bro. But the thing that
my point was Ugas is up for this fight. Ugas right now is probably on just like he cannot wait for that first bell to ring.
Well, I think Ugas has seen the mistakes he's made in the past. One of the mistakes that he made was in his approach towards Abel Ramos. He admitted it afterwards that he kind of took Abel Ramos a little lightly going into that fight. He almost suffered. He was on the bad end of a split decision in a fight which saw both fighters hurt on certain times. I know you made some, and I'll let you talk about the chinny chin chin thing in a little bit, but I think what really makes it interesting about Ugas is that he knows this is that one shot. This is his opportunity to go from that undercard guy to the main event. This opens up the books to not only holding a win over a great Manny Pacquiao, but opening the books and luring other fighters like possibly Errol Spence, maybe a Bud Crawford, maybe Virgil Ortiz, if he's able to be successful in his fight against Cabo Lucas. There is a whole slew of fighters and a whole lot of checks that Ugas is going to be able to cash based on this night.
You look at Ugas and you look at he's been the guy that's pretty much been avoided ever since that Sean Porter fight. He's been avoided. That was kind of his coming out party, even though he was on the wrong end of a bad decision. That was his coming out party. A lot of guys avoided him. There was talk about him and Danny Garcia mixing it up at 147. And then Danny Garcia elected to say, well, you know what? Maybe I'll go test the waters at 154. So now there's talk about Danny Garcia maybe fighting Tim Tszyu at 154 or Jermell Charlo. What I'm trying to say is that Ugas is a very heavily avoided fighter. There's too much risk and not enough reward at this point. Right now, Ugas pulls off this upset on the 21st, wins this fight, and then the world is his oyster. I mean, he can kind of call the shots. The only person he wouldn't be able to call the shots against would obviously be an Errol Spence. Yeah. But I tell you, man. And then with the climate, what's been happening in the last several weeks in Cuba, and obviously there's going to be some extra motivation for him. And I'm quite sure the vignettes are being put together right now. They're talking about. They're probably got the camera crews ready. They're going to be filming Ugas and interviews and this and talking about the plight of his family still in Cuba and everything that's been going on. It's gonna make for a pretty dramatic fight on the 21st.
Well, if you can see that already, I mean, I'm pretty sure they've already got the production wheels already rolling in that. That's
what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. They probably already got a pre-production schedule, and they're like, okay, listen, we're going to do this and this and this. And he obviously lives in trains, I think in Miami, Florida, but he's been in Vegas, acclimated to the weather and stuff. For a while now. He was
part of that very talented group of guys that came over from Cuba right prior to the Olympics and stuff because of all the situation that was going on. This is a guy who could have went on to possibly win a gold medal. That was a highly decorated amateur. Had his ups and downs, but you look at his past record. No one's, this is a guy that's never been stopped. All of his fights that he's lost have all been highly controversial. Every single one of them. Not one of them has been a split decision loss. So in reality, Ugas could be sitting completely undefeated at this point. You can't really go back and find one fight where you say he lost. He even go back and watch his early fight back in 2014 when he lost to Iman, and then when he lost to Robles. Both of those fights could have went either way. Just depending on how you want to watch the fight.
And I think at that point in his career, I think it's, he was in between trainers. He just was kind of an unmotivated guy. Maybe not. That's the wrong word. Maybe just not focused. He didn't have the right direction, right focus. Well, I believe he's training, I believe, with Ishmael Salas, right? The famed Cuban trainer. I believe he's training with him in Vegas, getting the best sparring out there, getting the best training out there. He's acclimated to the weather. It's going to be a good fight on the 21st, man. I'm excited about it. I would say it's just one notch. It's like 1 and 1A. One definitely would be Spence because I'm a Spence fan, and I was just intrigued by that matchup. But I'm not disappointed. I mean, this is going to be a great fight, and for anybody that's ready to just jump off the bandwagon and hightail it and go do something else, you might miss a hell of a fight. You might miss a fight of the year candidate.
Well, I'll tell you something right now. The people that actually know boxing and that are hardcore Manny Pacquiao fans, which it's kind of hard to find those, and I know I'm going to kind of put myself in the dick mode right now.
Yeah, that's kind of an oxymoron. That's like a jumbo shrimp. There's no hardcore boxing fans that are Manny Pacquiao fans.
Exactly. So usually most of them are somebody's Lola or cousin or whatever.
Well, they become boxing fans once a year or once every 2 years.
But the thing is that the ones that, if there are ones out there that know boxing and admire Manny Pacquiao, know this is a very, very dangerous fight. This is the fight you don't want. This is the fight You would much rather see Manny fighting against possibly a rematch against a Keith Thurman or fighting against a Cava Lucas or maybe even a Bud Crawford. Because Ugas, I'm telling you right now, he is more than a live dog. This is a guy who's been patterned. He comes from that famed Cuban boxing family. These are some of the best boxers in the world. People can say whatever they want to say. Cuba makes great fighters and stuff.
Listen, if Manny would have, if the fight was intact and Manny goes off and loses to Spence by wide decision or even a late stoppage, people say, you know what? Manny dared to be great against the elite of the division, the number one guy, three belt holder, the number one guy in the division, the boogeyman of the division, the guy who's basically calling out Canelo. But then if he loses to Ugas, so the pressure's on Manny now. You know, before it was like I had nothing to lose. Now you got everything to lose because you got Ugas, who's definitely going to be an underdog. It'll probably tighten up as we get closer towards the 21st, right? The odds will tighten up, and like I said, some late money will come in on Ugas. But he has the pressure on him now. Oh, whereas he didn't have that pressure before. I don't really believe he had the pressure with Spence. If he loses and gets knocked out, he was supposed to. Against Ugas, pressure does something to you too, man. It doesn't matter if it's a domestic job setting or a boxing
And I want to stay on this subject quick. I want to say hi to my son, Cosmic Colt. He's sitting in today for Eric the Red for a little bit. You know, he's taking
Cosmic Colt.
He just, for anybody that doesn't know, he's doing some fact checking for us. You know, making sure things are going good. He runs a lot of he's going to help me. He's kind of observing today, you know, help us with our social media thing, kind of make us, he's really good at that stuff. Much better than,
and he knows.
Yeah, what I was going to say was like that. Oh no, you can continue. What were you going to say?
Go ahead, Colty. You got the floor, buddy.
Oh, I was going to say, I was like, so earlier you said that Ugas was an avoided fighter, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to guess that this is going to be maybe more of a challenging fight for Manny because, you know, everybody was getting really hyped up for Errol Spence. They were doing this and this on the social medias and stuff. But then as soon as Errol dropped out, they were just like probably wondering who's going to be next. And Ugas may or may not have been that much of a surprise. Like, and it may have surprised some people because he just said he's an avoided fighter because it's really going to be a tough fight if he's that much of like an avoided fighter because most of the time when a fighter drops out, it's because like they can't do it. Like usually they'll try to like talk trash. Like for example, if like you're this fighter and then there's another fighter that's really good, you're gonna talk all this trash about them and then fight them. But then 5 seconds later, you're gonna regret your mistake. And then a month later, you're gonna drop out of the fight and then look like a freaking. They're gonna look like a chicken in the fight. So that's why.
A la Teofimo Lopez talked all that nonsense and then dropped out of the fight. Yeah,
that was a great point, Mark. Cool.
Yeah, it was.
It's like this, like, hey, I'm gonna fight this guy, and then they're gonna say, hey guys, guess what? This freaking guy looks like my cousin Sarah's pet stick bug.
Okay, now you're taking down a whole nother role. Okay, I gotta cut you off there, but. Great point, son. I'm going to come right back to you on that, but I don't want to lose my train of thought because, you know, my mind's a little filled with Theraflu right now. So getting back what we were talking about, now let's look at the other side of the thing, Mike, because I really want to focus on this situation because for a lot of people around the boxing world, this is devastating. This was probably the biggest fight in boxing in a while. I would say since, and I know a lot of people are going to say things a little differently, but I would say since the Lomachenko, where we're looking at what Lomachenko was going to accomplish with Teofimo Lopez. Not that Teofimo Lopez was that opponent that we were begging to see in that fight.
Yeah.
It was just we wanted to see Lomachenko complete what he had worked so hard to build.
Yeah, undisputed.
Exactly. This is that kind of a fight. This is going to be a fight that in some ways now might fly under the radar. And like you said, shame on yourself if you miss this because I think this is I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a huge Errol Spence fan. You know, I was the first one to say after Errol Spence took care of Danny Garcia, a fight in which I was kind of pushing. You know, I was kind of looking like maybe Danny had a shot. But you had to say all hail the king belonged to Errol Spence. He is the king of the welterweights. But unfortunately, every king, you know, has to fight for his crown. And that crown belonged to Manny Pacquiao before. It looks like Manny's coming back to reclaim it for some reason. Something just isn't sitting well with me with this. This is so out of character for me. I understand it's a medical thing, but we're talking about a guy who almost died, was thrown, launched from his fucking car, split his head, and was able to come back and fight and had a clean bill of health. And now all of a sudden this, I don't know. It's just not sitting well with me.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's the business of boxing. You never know. Here's the thing: boxing promoters, boxing networks, the strategists, matchmakers, judge, doesn't matter. They're always 2-3 steps ahead of what the general public perceives them to be at, and that's just it's almost like if you're playing chess, they're already seeing 3, 4, 5 moves down the road. They see something here. And I'm not saying that Errol Spence is not a legitimate thing, but you got to think to yourself, okay, one ophthalmologist could look at a retinal exam, because I've had them. I've seen the actual. I'm not an ophthalmologist, but I've had them and I've seen them. One of them could look at it and determine that it's a tear or slight tear. One could look at it and go, no, it's just normal wear and tear. He is a professional fighter. You know, he does suffer concussive blows to the head, trauma to the head repeatedly. And Errol Spence is not one to go light in sparring, they say in camp, but ever since the days of training at the Mayweather gym, I mean, he is always in there sparring, multiple guys, multiple rounds, hard sparring. So you got to think, did they see something and go, yeah, that's a potential tear? You know, I'm not going to say it had anything to do with financially, because there's no way that this fight wasn't going to do well. Now, was it going to get 1 million pay-per-view buys? I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know. I mean, Manny still can pull a pretty good pay-per-view number, but could he pull 1 million pay-per-view buys in a climate that we're in, where people are spending their dollars a little bit more wisely? You know, we're still not out of the pandemic. We're still kind of at the tail end of it, or at least we thought we were. But so you got to think, is there some economic, not economic, but is there some other strategical thing, or some other strategies being employed here? You just never know. You never know,
defensive
man.
Tactics that are possibly being applied to kind of maybe protect, maybe put a band-aid on possibly an open wound. Who knows? But I mean, the thing is right now, I think that this fight, I'm not going to say it was going to do 1 million, but you never know. Right now, with the way things are set up right now in boxing, there's been some really good fights, and there's some good fights on the forecast. But this is really one of those ones that came out of left field and came really fast. All of a sudden, it went from this possibility, and next thing you know, they signed the fight, and boom, it was like here. I mean, they've been baiting that hook with that bait on it of Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder 3 for the last
year.
Who knows how long? We're all disappointed. We know that's not going to happen. And then this comes out of nowhere. Believe me, every guy out there, especially the married ones, they'll understand this, knows when that one big pay-per-view, you're lucky if you could get one pay-per-view out of your wife a year. Maybe 2 if you're really lucky, but you're going to have to really work hard for it. But this is the one where they saved for. This is the one where they reminded their spouses, hey, I didn't get that one. They wanted that Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder. And when that kind of dissipated, this came about. It's like, dude, I want it. And everybody was going to jump on this, especially with the Kambosos, Teofimo Lopez fight falling apart, amongst other fights. This was the one.
Fury Wilder falling apart?
All of them. The 14th looked like it was going to be the world at one point. You know what I'm saying? Now this fight, but I mean, where this,
because that was the initial date, right? The 14th, and then they moved it to the 21st.
21st, yeah. Which, once again, let's kind of talk about that a little bit, because there's a little bit of talk about that too. That's one of the things I'm reading right now. And I'm going to send it to you right now. The initial date pushback was from the Spence's camp. That was an initial thing they were talking about. So I'm just saying, I'm not trying to come down on Errol Spence. I'm still a huge fan of Errol Spence, and I hope him all the best. And I hope that if this, whatever the situation is with this injury, he recovers from it and gets back to doing what he does best, and that's fighting. I'm disappointed that we lost the super bout against Manny Pacquiao, but I think when we lost a super bout, we might have gained a Thriller from Manila kind of situation, man.
Well, you might have gained a fight of the year kind of candidate, because I don't necessarily know if well, I mean, it's hard to say though, because well,
let's be honest. When was the last time you saw 2 southpaws have a good fight against each other? It's really hard.
Yeah.
It's a very sloppy affair. Now you've got a southpaw against a righty. We're right back to where we need to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
let's do this. Let's talk just briefly about Errol Spence. It's 6:55 right now. We started 25 minutes ago. Because there's a lot of fights this weekend we want to talk to.
There's a Eric right there.
Oh, there he is. Hey, Eric.
Eric the Red.
Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Is your mic on or something?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. We can hear you.
Sorry, I was late.
No problem, man. No problem. This was kind of a last minute little thing we threw together because I don't know if you saw the announcement, but Spence has a torn retina tear in his left eye. He's out of the fight on the 21st. So Ordinas Ugas is stepping in. The Cuban.
Oh, yeah.
I have a little thing to say real quick. So like everybody knows that like Errol is gonna be out of fight. Yes, it may be disappointing that we're not gonna be able to see this great fighter, go into the fight. And people are gonna say it's gonna be like getting a scratch on your knee and you're not gonna be able to heal it. But it's okay. You're gonna have another fighter fighting a great fighter. Like, it may even be like more entertaining with this fighter who's even more avoided than most other fighters, right?
Yeah, true.
Great point. A good point, Colt.
Really good point. Very good.
Okay, so go ahead, Mike. You were saying?
Wait. Hold on a second. Hold on 1 second.
Oh.
So AJ.
Yes.
So Colt obviously knows a lot about boxing. So, well, what do you talk boxing with your son all the time? Or
yeah, we do. What else are we gonna talk about?
He can't help, dude. He can't help it. Colt's been born into it. He's been at every major fight we've ever.
Dude, he was actually at Ugas's fight against Sean Porter at Dignity Health Center. He was there. He met Deontay Wilder. He met Effie Ajaba. He met everybody out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know? That's
awesome. I wanted to. We were gonna say really quick. Okay, now in this kind of an injury, right? A slight retinal tear, right? You know, a lot of fighters have had retinal tears over the years and have fought on, and some of them have lost, partial blindness, whatever. Famously, Sugar Ray Leonard had that retina tear from Kevin Howard.
Yep.
Aaron Pryor. So where does he go from here? Is this a situation to where could this jeopardize his career, or is this something that they can recover from if it's slight enough?
I think go ahead, Eric. You know a lot about this.
So
I'm no eye doctor, but I know.
I know tons about this. So I had a 360-degree retinal detachment on my right eye. I'm legally blind on my right eye now. But had it been just a tear, your body can heal that. I mean, he's probably, if he's just got a tear, they're probably going to do the bubble where they literally inject your eye with like this gas. And then he's got to like be face down, or depending upon where the tear is, to push the retina back up against the wall of the eyes so
that it can reattach.
Exactly, so it'll reattach, and he'll be fine. He might have some scarring on the retina. I mean, you talk about scarring. I've got tons of scarring on my right retina, but it wouldn't affect him as far as boxing. I don't believe, so long as he gets it healed up. But a full detachment. That's a whole different.
Yeah, Sugar Ray suffered.
Yeah, they're not saying this is full detachment. They're saying it's a slight tear. So maybe listen. The man's eyesight is obviously more important than any amount of money. I mean, So if this is in fact a legitimate injury, then hey, you know what? Godspeed. I hope he heals. I mean, like you said, AJ, we're Errol Spence fans here. We're boxing fans in general. What's not to like about Errol Spence? He's a no nonsense guy. He had almost a life-ending accident a couple years ago. Came back, won 2 impressive fights. Crown of the king of the 147-pound division. As far as I'm concerned, this doesn't really change anything. Even if Manny goes out there, looks devastating and knocks out Ugas or vice versa, Errol Spence is the number one spot in that division. Still goes through Errol Spence. It just does. Sorry.
Well, I think one of the things too is for a fighter like Errol Spence, and like I said, I'm not trying to take anything away from Errol Spence, but I'm talking about the people that surround Errol Spence. And being the fact that Errol did suffer some injuries in that accident, you got to think about this. We don't really know. We're not in that doctor's office. We don't really know the results of his actual CAT scan. Mike, we've had this conversation numerous times. There's a lot of fighters out there that are fighting with very spotty medical reports.
Yeah.
It's just the way it goes, depending on the fighter. Actually. And it really is, because it puts the fighter's life at jeopardy. So we don't really know what Errol Spence neurological things he might be suffering. And let's be honest, say what you want to say about Manny's age, his size, the point he's at in his career, the level that he's fought in the last few years, whatever it is. The bottom line is he has a track record of destroying people. Go back and look at some of the fighters that Manny's fought. Guys like Miguel Cotto. I'll give you one.
David Diaz.
Antonio Margarito was never the same after that fight. He brutalized the man to the point that the man's career was over.
David Diaz.
Yeah. So you got to look at a fighter like Errol Spence and what he's already been through medically and think to yourself, you know, after really looking at this fight and thinking dollars and dollars and cents, possible matchups, is Manny really the right guy? If Arrow's people decided that for some reason, based on the retina, it's only going to get worse, be possibly, if not career ending, because if something does happen to the eye, you cannot be one-eyed. You cannot go in with any type of flaw against a fighter of Manny Pacquiao. He's like a shark. If he senses something's wrong with you, he's going to go right after it. And believe me, I think it's the right choice, bro.
Well, the funny thing about a retina that's torn like that, say it is a slight tear, okay? Those headshots would absolutely tear it more. Exactly. There's no ifs, ands, buts. What? I don't give a damn what doctor says.
Yeah.
Those head blows will absolutely tear it more. And then, then he could be looking at a full detachment of the macula, and be blinded for the rest of his life, like me. You know what I mean? So
great point, Eric.
It's not worth it. It's even the smallest tear, smallest rip. It's just not worth it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You're right.
But real quick, what I was going to say too was the fact that, this goes back to something we talked about, and I know we got to jump and we got to talk about so many fights and we're running out of time. But real quick, the amount of orbital bones and retina damage that's happened in boxing in the recent years is really starting to get at an alarming rate, more than I've ever remembered in the past years. I can remember when Sugar Ray Leonard got his detached retina. It was a rarity. Maybe that happened more. Maybe they just didn't test for it as much, but I'm seeing it more and more. And I hear the stupid answer, oh, well, people hit harder today. No, that's bullshit. It's the gloves. It's the equipment that we're wearing.
Yeah,
something's
I was thinking
not
that the same
right.
thing.
Something is not right. And Mike, this is something we can push into deeper because you work with manufacturers and glove guys. You know gloves probably better than anybody. We could talk about that more, but let's jump on some of the new stuff that's coming up, Mike.
Well, let's do this, guys. That's enough on that subject. Let's jump to this weekend's fight. We still got 3 great cards this weekend. Okay. We've got the Showtime card at Dignity Health in Carson. We've got fights from Frisco, Texas on DAZN. Virgil Ortiz fighting in the main event there. And then we've also got the fights in Vegas. Andrew Maloney rematch against Joshua Franco. I mean, you got your choice. I don't know how they're going to stagger these fights, man, but we're going to have to have multiple TV screens on to watch all these.
That's what I do. I got 3 TV screens going all simultaneously.
Let's talk about the local fights first. Let's talk about Carson, California. Main event. John Rael Casimero, the Filipino, same camp as Manny Pacquiao or same management team, fighting
Rigondeaux.
Rigondeaux for 118-pound title.
That's gonna be a good fight.
I'm gonna say right now, bro, and I'm gonna be real brief on this because I know we got a lot to cover on this stuff. This is the same situation as Ugas. You go from losing a fighter of the magnitude of a Nonito Donaire, and you end up with a guy like Rigondeaux. Say what you want to say about Nonito Donaire, but he is not the type of avoided fighter that Garmendo Rigondeaux is. This is a much more dangerous fight, I think, for Casimero in so many ways. You know what I'm saying? Completely different fighter. A fighter who's actually possesses freakish power when he wants to use that freakish power. So I'm gonna let you elaborate more about that, bro.
No, I agree. And as of late, Rigondeaux, just like Erislandy Lara, has decided to settle down on his punches a little bit more, settle down, you know what I mean, and fight more flat-footed as opposed to always fighting off the back foot and not really putting his power into the punches. That's an exciting fight. I personally am going to be rooting for Rigondeaux. I really don't like what's coming out of the Casimero camp, the antics I've seen the last few months, and just the I don't know, the entire I don't know, the aura of the guy and the overconfidence, and all of a sudden the guy thinks he's a superstar. And I think he should be thanking his lucky stars he's fighting Rigondeaux and not Donaire, because Donaire had some extra motivation for that fight. Either way, that's going to be a great fight, main event. I believe on the undercard, or no, I'm confusing undercards now. I know Gary Antonio Russell fights, but then they've been really, really slow on putting that undercard together, putting the prelim bouts.
I've actually got it. I got it together.
Did they put it together finally? The full thing?
They got one other fight. Rasheed Warren is also is going to be on the fight against Damian Vasquez.
But for a fight that's happening in a few days from now, they really have dragged it out because Rene Moreno was supposed to fight on this card. Is he still going to fight? And there was no, he's not going to fight. No, they couldn't. the commission with the opponent selection and clearing it, whatever. I don't know, man. I know TGB is very busy right now. They were promoting the pay-per-view the week following. They've got this fight. They got guys stretched kind of thin. I don't know who's in charge of signing off on all these fights, but it's coming together kind of slow.
Yeah.
So let's just,
Yeah. And the thing is, it's going to be a tough, like I said, I don't see it being an extremely tough fight for Russell, who actually really impresses me. I like, Gary Antoine Russell, who's the brother of obviously Gary Russell. It's a weird situation. They're all named Gary Russell.
Yeah. But, Gary Antonio, Gary Antoine, they all have different middle names. Yeah.
Yeah. He's a really good fighter. And so like this, and he's fighting against Emmanuel Rodriguez, a guy who was blasted out in 2 rounds by the Monster and in a way, but then had a better test in his last fight. But who knows? You know what I'm saying? I mean, we're going to see what's going to happen, but
so that's happening right here in Carson, California. That'll be on Showtime. Okay.
I might actually be at that fight and covering it from there.
Well, okay. So Vegas, okay, let's jump over to Vegas, 250 miles away. You've got the rematch that I've been waiting for a long time. I kind of wish it wasn't happening on the same night, because I'm going to have to be, just like I said, switching back and forth. But Andrew Maloney, and as far as I'm concerned, the legitimate 118-pound champion, 115-pound champion, right? And that, is he fighting at Superfly?
Yes, they're fighting at super flyweight.
So we all know what happened in his last fight a few months ago against Joshua Franco. He proceeded to just really put a shellacking on Franco for 2-3 rounds, and then they feigned a headbutt. I even saw some people talking about it, going, well, that fight was where they clash heads. That they showed it over and over again. There was never a clash of heads.
Nothing.
Then they tried to say that, it was a thumbing of the eye. The bottom line is this: Joshua Franco, his entire team, they bitched out. They knew they were going to leave that belt in the middle of that ring that night, so they found their way out. And I fully expect Maloney. I just hope Maloney doesn't come on there too aggressive and too psyched up for this fight, because we know what happens sometimes when you're just too amped up for a rematch. You just don't perform.
What happened to his brother Jason against the Monster? I mean,
Yeah.
I see. I'm
thinking more along the lines of Jeff Fennick, when Jeff Fennick was robbed against Azuma Nelson, and then in the rematch he just did not perform.
He just has to go in there and fight his fight. He has to take it like he took it from the last round. Whatever he did in the last fight, do exactly the same thing. Don't change a goddamn thing. Just go in there and do it, because Franco isn't going to be able to come up with a whole new bag of tricks. That body work that Maloney was putting on Franco was destroying him early on in the fight.
That jab was.
That's it. Stick to that, and it should be an easy victory. He'll walk away with the title.
If they don't do the same thing again.
Also on the card, Arnold Barboza, a local kid. Arnold Barboza is fighting, and an opponent selection. I can't remember the guy's name, but I wasn't too excited about it. Yeah, I really thought Barboza was really gonna take that next jump. But I mean, it's not his fault. It's the matchmakers. I get it. But after this fight, if he comes out of this fight, he really needs to step up his competition. Barboza does, because he's got a lot of potential and he's a good kid. He's got a lot of class but he's got to step up. It's time.
Barboza's at a situation now. He's fighting against a guy that was beaten thoroughly by Devin Haney a few years ago. The situation that Arnold's got right now is he's running out of time. At 29 years old, Barboza's running out of time. He's really got to kind of put, fighters of this magnitude, and nothing against Marlon, but these aren't the kind of fights you're supposed to be taking at this point. If he's going to really push himself, compel him, kind of put himself into that upper echelon where he's going to get possibly, one of these other fighters like a Josh Taylor, somebody later on. This isn't going to happen. Fighting a guy like that was a Devin Haney victim just a few years ago and stuff. And at 29 years old, I hate to say it, I like Arnold, but he's running out of time.
Yeah, and Arnold, they say the last thing to go is your power, but Arnold Barboza is not a power puncher. He's got decent pop, but he's not a guy that can rely on his power.
He's a big guy for the division, but you would think he would be stronger for the division based on his size, but he's not.
Yeah.
But he's very durable. He's a tough and rumble kind of guy, but I wish him the best, but this is not how you're going to get it done.
All right, so now we're going to jump over to DAZN. So we went from Showtime to ESPN to now DAZN. On DAZN, the main event in Frisco, Texas, is Virgil Ortiz stepping up, and would definitely could be considered. Well, I don't know. I guess you can say on paper, Kavalukas is the number one, his toughest opponent to date because of his, the tough fight he gave Terrence Crawford. But we'll see. I mean, if Ortiz goes out there and just dominates Kavalukas, and just stops him or just looks devastating, forces a stoppage or a knockout or just a wide points win, you got to think to yourself, well, I know what the Terrence Crawford faithful are going to say. Well, Terrence softened him up for Ortiz, but that's what they're going to say. But I mean, I don't know. What do you think about this fight? I mean, Lucas is a tough guy.
Lucas is a tough guy. He's a guy, obviously, he showed in the Terrence Crawford fight. He has skill. He was able to bully Crawford. But then again, I'm going to go back to what we said before, bro. How good is Terrence Crawford? It's really hard to gauge him because you got to look at the people that he's faced in the last few years and how these fights have gone on. He hasn't really been in a rough and tumble fight. Calvin Lucas was the first one since Benavidez to really bring the fight to him, in a sense. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he was a little bit successful. That's the kind of fight that Virgil Ortiz wants. Now, the difference was Terrence Crawford was able to make that adjustment, get the distance, and make Cabo Lucas pay the price. Virgil Ortiz hasn't shown that level yet. So if he continues in that barn burner with a strong guy like Cabo Lucas, based on what happened in Virgil's, even though he was successful against Mo Hooker, I still look at Mo Hooker like he's a very tough fighter. And Mo Hooker was right in there up until the injury.
No, he was. And, I actually saw an interview with Virgil where he talked about the camp prior to that, he had a rough camp, wasn't feeling well. And then he came out of it. He had a slight injury that comes out of it. Then he contracted COVID and lost a couple of weeks training and then came back. I'm not saying he's making excuses because he doesn't seem like the kind of kid that's going to make excuses, but let's just hope he has a good showing here because, the bar has been set very high for him. A lot of people are very, very high on him. Between him and Jared Boots Ennis, they're the two up and coming prospects at that division that are, that people are really, really have high hopes for. Yeah. At this point in the game, I would say, even though, they've never fought, but I would say Boots Ennis is definitely more promising in my eyes than Virgil Ortiz.
I think Virgil's got a lot of holes, and I think you're absolutely right. I've noticed more excuses coming out of Virgil Ortiz in his camp than I've noticed solutions, or I've noticed, what we're going to do to repair these things. The problem I got with Virgil Ortiz, and I'm going to say it again, going into this fight against Cabo Lucas, if he gets himself into a situation where it's a firefight, okay, he's not shown in the past. The guys that he's been able to beat in the past in the firefights are not heavy punchers. He's in there with a guy who's actually got a bit of a pop in the Mean Machine. So This is going to be a different situation for Virgil. But like I said, I mean, if he's successful and he's able to go in there and win this fight and get out of there unscathed, we can see what can happen next. We know that they're trying to prime him. I think this is more the Bud Crawford camp trying to gauge Virgil. If Virgil goes in there and struggles with Cabo Lucas, they're going to take Virgil. If Virgil goes in there and blasts Cabo Lucas out in 2 rounds, Virgil's name is fucking dropped from Bud Crawford's fucking thoughts for the future.
Yeah, well, apparently Bud Crawford, supposedly they're negotiating a fight with him and Sean Porter. The WBO is mandated. Not that the WBO can really force 2 guys to fight. What's the worst that can happen? I mean, they'll just, Well,
the thing is that they're going to do that thing because the WBO is the only organization that actually has a 60-40 with the split and how it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it's the negotiable 60-40. Is Bud Crawford now? Sean Porter supposedly people have already said we'll take the 40. But for some reason now, Bud Crawford's people, they're saying something. They're trying to leverage that a little bit even wider. That's the problem I got, man. I don't understand what the hesitancy is from Bud Crawford about fighting Sean Porter. If he thinks Sean Porter doesn't even belong in the ring with him, like he's stated so many times that he doesn't even belong in the ring with him. He calls him a second, a guy who's already been beat by everybody. Why do I got to go beat him when I could beat these other guys? They run from me. I'm the most avoided fighter, like Devin Haney says all the time. No. Ugas is an avoided fighter. Bud Crawford's not an avoided fighter. I still lean towards Porter in this fight. Is it going to happen? I don't think. I think Bud bids himself out.
I think he's going to do the same thing that he accused Errol Spence of doing.
Exactly.
Where he just, I'm going to use my leverage because I'm the champion. I'm going to, I want 70-30 or 65-35.
That's what he wants. And it doesn't work that way it doesn't work that way, man.
Yeah.
It doesn't. So It is what it is, man. It's unfortunate because what is Bud now? 32, Mike?
Yeah, he's 32 years old. 31.
The clock's done, man. That's it.
Clock's ticking. Yeah.
I mean,
here's a guy that for somebody
that's why
that
he's doing it though. Maybe that's why he's doing. He's doing this to try and hold on to his
for one big pay-per-view fight, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe that's what he's doing.
What does he think he is? Nino LaRocca? Come on, dude. It's not going to happen, bro. Those days are over.
I don't think so either. I don't think so either. But you know what? That you never know. That could be in his mind. You know, I got to hold out. I got to hold out. I got to get a
here's the way I
big
look at it.
payday.
You can go back and look at Bud Crawford's career from this point on. I don't care if the next 3 fighters he fights is Errol Spence, Keith Thurman, and Danny Garcia or Sean Porter. It is still a disappointment for what could have been. There were so many possibilities out there and so many fighters, so many great mega fights that he could have stepped up and fought. He could have fought guys like Matisse and other fighters. He never did. He always found a way to get away from these guys. You know what I'm saying? And that's the unfortunate thing. Is he ever going to fight a guy like he could have stayed out at junior welterweight and fought against Josh Taylor? That would have been a great fight, but it's not going to happen. He's going to wait till Josh Taylor slips up, but he doesn't understand. He doesn't hold the fountain of youth. He's an old man at this point. Bud's turning into dust. Okay. Yeah. And those days are done.
Well, it's like we said, you know, in weeks past, you know, great fighters look for the great fight. And he's not a great fighter. I mean, he's a decent fighter, but he's not a great fighter. A great fighter reaches that opponent that everybody says, "Oh, well, you shouldn't go against him." Well, then I'm going to go against him if they say he.
It's such a contrast. You look at someone like Manny Pacquiao, who's daring to be great against guys
hesitation.
That guys that are 13, 14 years younger than him. Bigger than him, stronger than him, and he's daring to be great, even at an advanced age of his career.
Well, that's the thing that disgusts me, bro. When people talk about, when they use people's names like Errol Spence, Bud Crawford, or Manny Pacquiao, to even put Bud Crawford in that realm, when you could go back and look at, you know, not that Errol's resume matches Manny's, but if you look at his resume, he's daring to be great. He's fought guys like, you know, Kell Brook, when Kell Brook was Kell Brook, in a sense, you know what I'm saying? He fought guys like Sean Porter when nobody else wanted to fight him. You know, he's fighting against
Danny Garcia,
the fighters that Bud should have fought a couple years ago, but Bud still hasn't fought him. And that's what disgusts me when you hear Bud say something like, "Oh, well, I was going to fight Danny 3 years ago," but you didn't fight him 3 years ago. So he doesn't belong on your resume. Don't even mention the man's name. Bud thinks because he had a negotiation and the guy in the fight didn't happen, that Bud gets a mental victory. It's insane. It's insane, bro. It's insane.
Yeah,
to hear this guy talk.
Exactly.
The guy's really deluded. I mean, seriously, he's done. But whatever. But I'm excited. So what
Maybe
other fights?
Got hit in the head one too many times.
I don't know. What else we got on the cooker for this week?
Well, those are the big. I mean, the undercards are shaping up to be pretty good, but those are the big fights coming up this weekend. It's a great weekend of fighting. And like I said, even the 21st, I think the 21st stands alone. I don't know if there's any other cards. There might be a DAZN card, a Matchroom card coming from the UK, but that usually happens earlier in the day, 2:00 Pacific time. Cool. So that won't really affect the pay-per-view fight next week. And then on the 28th, I think we've got some fights on the 28th as well. No, there is the fights on the 28th. David Benavidez is fighting at the Phoenix Arena against Jose Uzcategui. And then his brother Jesse's on the undercard for that one. And then you know who else is back too is the undefeated kid Carlos Castro, 26-0. Carlos Castro is fighting, I just saw it today. He's fighting a guy we've seen fight multiple times. And Castro's 26-0 now. And I remember he was at the gym sparring about 2 years ago. And I think he was like 23 or 24-0 or 25-0. So he's had a little bit of a downtime during COVID. He hasn't been as active as he'd like to. So this is a good fight for him coming back. Very good kid. Renee hopefully might fight on that card, the 28th. He might get a slot on that fight.
That kid's in such a tough situation right now, man. But I'm hoping that he's still so young, which is a good thing. He's got time on his side still, which is good, you know?
Yeah. A lot of fighters just don't want to fight him, man.
Hey, but real quick, we didn't get an opportunity to really talk about it, stuff like this, but Michael's fight. Did we get a chance to talk about that at all? Nerato's victory?
Michael and Max both fought in they both fought in Arizona a few weeks ago. Both look spectacular. They both won. Yeah. Max won a stoppage. I think it was a 4th round TKO. Yeah. And then Michael won a 6-round decision, I believe. 6-round unit, won every round. Tough. He fought a tough kid. Tweak, nothing major. It was just a little slight aggravation, inflammation in his hand, but he's already back in training. He's good. Perfect. I mean, with the fights around here, it just seems like because of COVID, so many guys are trying to get on these fights now. It's just so hard to get a spot. So the fights, they took the fights in Arizona, and we went there for the weekend, and it was good. Who else? Yeah, and then the kid Adrian Servine is back back in training. He had a little knee injury a few weeks ago, nothing major, but he's back training. So there's a good stable of fighters here, man. Robert's got some good, young, strong, hungry kids. So it's just
forward to say that
we look like we were about to come out of this whole thing, and now things are locking back down again. So God, I just hope it doesn't affect the fight game too much, you know?
Yeah.
Especially that pay-per-view, you know, next Saturday.
Well, you got the pay-per-view obviously coming up, and then we got some big fights coming up. Obviously, you talked about it, Carlos Castro. He's got that fight against Oscar Escandon.
Yeah, Oscar Escandon. Yeah,
that's a big fight. Escandon, former champion. You know,
Escandon's a tough guy. I mean, he's that short guy, right? He's tough. He just always comes, gives rounds, gives everything he's got. Castro's a very skilled fighter. Should handle him, but
yeah. But like I said, Escandon's that type of guy, man. When you just, you know, he was in a live or die fight against Brandon Figueroa and against Gary. I mean, this guy's fought Brandon Figueroa, Gary Russell, you know, King Tug. I mean,
he's fought everybody. Yeah,
the guys fought everybody. So it's a big good test for Carlos. But I'll tell you right now is the one I'm kind of looking forward to, and it's kind of weird and it's selfish in a way to say it, but on the 4th, the rematch between Josh Warrington and Mauricio Lara. They were talking about.
Oh yeah. So Warrington is exercising that rematch clause.
I think it's a big mistake myself personally, but I can see why Warrington's doing it for pride. He looks in great shape right now. I watched him in his fight where he was actually hosting it for the fights that were coming from that were on DAZN earlier this week on Saturday. I was watching the fight with Jazza. He lost when he got
Jazza Dickens.
Yeah, he ended up getting beat by
Kid Galahad.
Galahad. That's all. It's a fight I forgot to talk about. Kid Galahad looked phenomenal. Looked amazing. Looked really solid.
I saw that fight too. That was a good fight.
Very impressive Kid Galahad. Jazz is the kind of guy who that guy could easily be a world champion.
Yeah.
But it just shows you the level of talent that Kid Galahad had. Go back and watch Kid Galahad's defeat against Josh Warrington. He didn't lose that fight. Okay. People can say whatever they want to do. He didn't lose that fight. But to hear Josh Warrington make comments like, well, you know, Kid Galahad, you know, he did this, he did that. Dude, handle Mauricio Lara, and then we'll talk about Kid. Kid Galahad's a legitimate champion. He took the title. The title's now his. It's not some lineal title. He's the IBO champion of the world.
Yeah.
So it is what it is.
Yeah. That'd be good. That should be good.
Hey,
Colt, do you got anything to say as we close this out?
Well, one thing I've been
Colt's our fact checker.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to say, nothing about the fights, but it's just about some fights. So usually, like, you'll have this fighter fight this fighter. That's basically the point of boxing. But usually it's gonna be kind of a problem when you have one good fighter fighting, but then you have another good fighter who's just as good, yet even better than the other one. So it could be a 50-50 chance. Like, for example, this fighter has this many wins and then 0 loses, but then you have the same one that has like no loses either, but just like a couple more wins. So it's gonna be like a difficult decision. Like, oh no, who should I root for? Like, sure, you may know some of them, but like, what if you don't know any of them? But then now you know that they're both good fighters. Like, it's gonna be kind of difficult to.
All right, cool. I'll tell you real quick. I don't even interrupt you. I'm gonna use the horse racing tactic. Whenever you take a person who's never bet on a horse race, and you let them the first time they've ever bet on a horse, what do, Michael and Eric?
You bet the
bet
farm
on
on
goddamn bet that horse. Give it to me now, Colt. I want to know right now, Ugas Pacquiao, who wins this fight?
I'm gonna go for Pacquiao.
There you go. You got it, people. Manny Pacquiao.
Put your money on Pacquiao, guys.
Yeah,
Manny,
put your money on Pacquiao.
He said Pacquiao. Okay, I'm gonna have to dip for a little bit. I don't like to do things like this, but I know I'm gonna take some heat. Probably gonna get something put in my adobo tonight. Who knows? But I'm gonna tell you now. I see a shocker. I think this is a bad decision on Manny's camp. I'm sitting here wearing a shirt from the Philippines. Manny Pacquiao, Team Pacquiao. I'm telling you now. Ugas just might be the kryptonite. Manny didn't want to open.
Exactly. All right, guys. But that's about
Pacquiao
Take us out, guys.
Well, hey, okay. So listen, that was a good show. First time back in a couple weeks. I know, AJ, you were under the weather. Everybody's been real busy. We're definitely going to get back here on Sunday and talk about these fights on Saturday, because there's a lot of fights on Saturday. We'll be back Sunday. Sunday, we're going to shoot for 5 p.m. on the West Coast, 8 o'clock Eastern time. Good show, guys. Good seeing everybody.
It's good to see my brothers, man. I know I've been out of the loop together, guys.
Yeah.
Good to see my brothers, dude.
So good to see you guys. Absolutely.
Yeah. So for everybody out there, for all of us at Enter the Ring, Mighty Mike,
AJ Rage.
Eric the Red.
And
Cosmic Colt.
Cosmic Cult. We're Enter the Ring Live. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. We'll see you next Sunday.
See
Don't
everybody.
forget to
Bye-bye.
subscribe, people.